not going to apologize.
No, we won't be apologizing, and I don't, sometimes these games are played during political campaigns. I understand what the issue is here. Mr. Romney claims that he's Mr. Fix-It for the economy because of his business experience. And so I think voters entirely legitimately want to know, well, what exactly was that business experience?
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 5 a.m. on the West Coast as you take a live look at New York City. Joe and I are back along with former foreign policy advisor to the Bush administration, now an advisor to the Romney campaign, Dan Senor, MSNBC political analyst and visiting professor at NYU, former Democratic Congressman Harold Ford Jr. We also have the host of CNBC's Street Signs, Brian Sullivan, and in Washington, political editor and White House correspondent for the Huffington Post, Sam Stein. What does retroactively retired mean, Dan Senor?
It means,
it means he decided to retire after he retired, when he decided it might be politically good to use the word retroactively retired.
In February of '99, Mitt Romney left Bain Capital.
Yeah.
He went to go run the Olympics. They had a gradual process to build an interim management committee.
Right.
He was gone for those couple years. Everyone who's looked closely at this, who's independent, not one of the campaigns,
yeah.
The Washington Post has looked at it, has called the attacks against Romney that he was actually there. They've called the attacks unfair, untrue, and misleading. Factcheck.org has given it 4 Pinocchios. Today's New York Times, a very well-reported article by Nick Huffman-Sori and Michael Shear. Page 810 of the New York Times reads, "No evidence has yet emerged that Mr. Romney exercised his powers at Bain after February 1999 or directed the fund's investments after he left." So the reality is he wasn't there. He had no practical involvement in the firm during those couple years. And the Obama campaign is trying to make something out of nothing. And we really should have a real discussion about what's going on in the economy rather than this
I think what they're doing and what this plays into is the fact that you kind of don't feel like you know who Mitt Romney is, and this is helping people feel like, oh, maybe that's what he's like. Why won't he release his tax returns? Why won't he tell us exactly what went down at Bain? Wait a minute, retroactively retired. It's the narrative that is going to stick if he's not careful.
But let's be very specific about the attack that they are focusing on, that the president himself doubled down on that clip you just played at the opening of the show. He is saying, the president and his advisors are saying, that Mitt Romney was working somewhere and involved with the company's decisions at a time that everyone who was involved with the company, every independent group who've looked at that period say wasn't true, and the president's just continuing to run ads on that. That tells me that they're being dishonest and they're doing so to create a distraction. They've gone so far as to accuse him of a possible felony. This is like crazy land.
Okay, let's get to that. Today, President Obama will hold a town hall meeting in Cincinnati where he will continue to push the narrative that a vote for Mitt Romney is a vote for outsourcing, pointing to a new report that estimates Mitt Romney's tax policy will result in more American jobs moving overseas. Need to ask Brian about that. Stand by. President Obama this weekend said there would be no apologies after a member of his campaign suggested that the Republican contender may have broken the law by misrepresenting his role with Bain Capital after 1999. Now, yesterday on Meet the Press, senior campaign advisor Ed Gillespie defended his candidate, explaining that Romney had retired retroactively from the firm.
He was still CEO and had shares, but he wasn't responsible for management, and that's the bottom line.
Even when he was on leave, does he stand by business decisions that were made by the firm he created?
He actually retired retroactively at that point, David, because he ended up not going back to the firm after his time in Salt Lake City. So he was actually retired from Bain. But look, Bain's a good company. It's been very successful. It's helped create a lot of jobs, and the fact is private sector experience is a beneficial thing, would be beneficial in the White House and the Obama campaign.
He stands behind decisions the company's made about call centers or about outsourcing, which in a lot of circles is considered good business.
Well, in terms of stands by them, I don't know what you mean. They weren't his decisions. He wasn't there at the time that those decisions were made. Bain is a good company.
All right, Brian Sullivan, have you ever retired retroactively?
No, but I hope to.
Yeah, and I hope to, the way Mitt Romney did too. And to explain what the attacks on his tax policy and outsourcing, does this have any, I guess, precedent in terms of looking back at Mitt Romney's career? Is it fair?
It depends on what side you're on, whether you define it as fair.
Okay.
Right? I mean, look at the attacks.
Could it be seen as fair?
Sure, of course, by the majority of the Americans, right? Because the majority of America is not wealthy. So you say private equity, right? It's kind of a scary... Bain itself, the name sounds scary, right? Let's raise taxes on the top 2%, right? Because they can help. If you look at that policy, the top 2% pay, well, if we raise taxes, it'll be about $100 billion a year. Let's call that generous. The U.S. government makes $125 billion a year in erroneous or fraudulent payments to dead people and the wrong people.
That's a problem.
Right? Clean your own house up first. If Romney was smart, that's where he'd go. I have to say that Obama's team is taking Romney to the bank because Romney's team is back on its heels doing this. Just say, listen, we have 8.2% unemployment. What's the solution here?
Harold Ford Jr.
Look, I think that probably the more potent line of attack for the president right now, as you look at this the questions around Bain. Bain is a successful franchise. Remember, they invested money on behalf of unions, colleges, and universities. I think the bigger question for Mitt Romney are the tax returns, what may be in there. I know there was a discussion last week between Dan and my friend Robert Gibbs about this. It'll be made clear to a lot of Americans what Bain is, what he did at Bain, how much money he made there. I like what the president's going to do today more than anything, though, as he talks about the policies that Romney's proposing, as he travels to battleground states and begins to talk more specifically about how the Romney tax plan, how the Romney spending plan. I think
it's a bad place to go for him today. Cincinnati's a very bad place for the president today because 2 months ago, Harold, Procter & Gamble, the biggest company in Cincinnati, agreed to move 20 of its top executives from the beauty division, essentially the headquarters of the beauty division, to Singapore.
Right. All right.
But that's a better place for Barack Obama, largely because he will continue to make the case that the policies and ideas and recommendations made by Governor Romney, if he were to be elected president, might cause all 50 of them to be relocated. I love the fact when the president is out talking specifically about whether you agree with him or not, but when he's talking specifically about the Paul Ryan plan, when he's talking specifically about how Mitt Romney would not agree to a 10-to-1 disparity between spending cuts and tax increases to lower our federal our trajectory in terms of spending. That's where the president wants to be because that's where we are. That's talking about the future and giving the American people a real sense of where he will take us over the next 4 years.
So I want to get Joe to weigh in on this. Joe, I was trying to tell people here that you retired retroactively, but nobody believed me.
Yeah.
So why don't you weigh in?
I retired retroactively. I got involved with the Nantucket Relief Fund.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for the kids, and they just won't believe me. I got a call like 5 years ago. Come to Nantucket, but
you
it's
have
about
to say
the
that.
kids. And Dan Senor, nobody believes me. And you know what else? Nobody seems to believe Mitt Romney. What does retiring retroactively mean when you're signing forms you're still working at Bain? Could you explain this?
Look, yeah, sure, Joe. I think I know
this is his second whirl at this. This is the problem that you have to...
The problem is that there's a lot of big issues in this campaign, all right? President Obama does not have an explanation for what happened in his first term. He doesn't have a rationale for why he needs a second term. So they're throwing up a lot of dust, and we are discussing that dust right now. But to answer Joe's question, Mitt Romney was at Bain Capital. He left to go do the Olympics. He, I think, thought he could still somewhat be involved in Bain Capital when he left, but it was clear that he couldn't. He couldn't even get back in time for meetings. He was so consumed. He was working 18 hours a day saving the Olympics, and he was basically gone from Bain Capital beginning February of '99 and never came back. So, and by the way, Joe, everybody's saying that. The New York Times is saying that today. The Washington Post fact checkers are saying that. The factcheck.org is saying that. I mean, the guy who was running Bain Capital at the time is saying that, who's a big Democrat.
And Joe, bring in Sam Stein as well. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, Sam. Yeah, there are people that are lining things up here. I'm not suggesting that the Romney campaign or Mitt Romney may not be telling the truth 4 or 5 days later. But it's been a long, bumpy road to get here, from just the out-and-out denials to now saying that he retroactively retired. It seems, and Dan Senor, for once we won't say Dan Senor runs the Mitt Romney campaign, but other than Dan Senor, there's been some sloppy campaign work coming out of Boston, hasn't there?
Yeah, and I think it reflects the complexity of the financial world in which Mitt Romney lived for a while. You know, I sort of see Dan's point in the respect that Mitt Romney went to the Olympics. It was an all-consuming job. He realized he couldn't be there at Bain. He couldn't make the managerial decisions that he made. And so, yes, he set up a managing committee, and there he retired a couple years later from. But, you know, it's interesting to me, and I'd been off and I had to go back and look at this. It's interesting to me that we're sort of ignoring the fact that it's not like Bain, everyone at Bain left with Mitt Romney. These were the people that he put in place. This was the culture that he put in place. The decisions that Bain made after Mitt Romney left in those years were basically part of the culture that he had established going from the founding of the firm. So, you know, for them to like run away from these decisions as if they're covered in the Ebola virus is sort of confusing to me, because this is Bain. This is what they did, and I think it's totally legitimate for the Obama campaign to say, if this is your primary reason for saying you'd be a good president, let's look at what that actually would result in. Let's look at the actual policy implications of that, and I don't see how that's unfair, or in Dan's words, how that's dust.
And Joe, take a look at this. Former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel weighed in yesterday morning with some advice for Mitt Romney.
Give it up about Stephanie. Don't worry about that. What are you going to do when the Chinese leader says something, or Putin says to you? Going to whine as your way? You cannot do that. And as Mitt Romney says once to his own Republican colleagues, stop whining. I give him his own advice. Stop whining. Defend. If you want to claim Bain Capital as your calling card to the White House, then defend what happened to Bain Capital and what happened to those jobs that went overseas, those jobs that were actually cut and eliminated, the companies that went into bankruptcy.
Guy, he sounds like Ari. He really does.
He sounds just like Ari, and he sounds like Zeke. These are the crazy Emanuel brothers. Seriously, they should go out on the road and have an act. But Dan Senor, how do you respond? How does your campaign respond to the ROM challenge? Stop whining and just embrace that record. And when you embrace the record, you have to embrace the full record.
This is honestly how we'd respond. Let's start having a discussion about what happened over the last few years, about President Obama's big plans, big promises for what he'd do for the economy. Very few, if any of them, have come through. Let's have a discussion about what he intends to do going forward.
I want to know what you do with this. The growing number of influential Republicans who are calling on Mitt Romney to make more of his tax returns available to the public. Listen.
You should release the tax returns tomorrow. It's crazy. You've got to release 6, 8, 10 years of back tax returns. Take the hit for a day or two, and then give a serious speech on Thursday in which he says, okay, we've had this ridiculous picayune debate about when I took my leave from Bain and when I didn't, and you can now look to my tax returns. Now let's have a debate about capitalism. Let's have a debate about business, and let's have a debate about jobs.
If something's going to come out, get it out in a hurry. I do not know why, given that Mr. Romney knew the day that McCain lost in 2008 that he was going to run for president again, that he didn't get all of this out and tidy up some of his offshore accounts and all the rest. He's done nothing illegal, nothing unseemly, nothing improper, but lots that's in politics. And he's now in the politics business.
And Joe, then there was this from Alabama's Republican Governor Robert Bentley, who is quoted by the Associated Press saying this: if you have things to hide, then maybe you're doing things wrong. I think you ought to be willing to release everything to the American people. After the comments went viral, Governor Bentley quickly backtracked, saying he was taken out of context. Joe.
Yeah, Brian Sullivan, there are extraordinary complexities to somebody like Mitt Romney. When you run Bain Capital, when you have as many holdings that Mitt Romney has had, and so there are going to be some things that may be a little bit ugly out there. But at the same time, don't you think that if you're running for president of the United States, and if you're talking about business as the centerpiece of your campaign, doesn't Mitt Romney need to release the records? And if there are problems with it, what could what could be in him is, Brian, well, let's talk about what could be in him, Brian. The fact is, there are a couple of years where he may not have paid any taxes at all. Maybe he's concerned about that. Maybe he's concerned about offshore accounts. But if it's going to come out, he needs to get them out now so he has a couple of months to explain it before the election, right?
I completely agree. I mean, listen, Mitt Romney has got to go on the offensive here, all right? What's going to come out is that Mitt Romney is a rich guy. What also is going to come out is that Mitt Romney took advantage of all the legally allowable tax deductions provided him by years of congressional wheeling and dealing over the last 30, 40, 50 years with regard to income tax rates and deductions. And what Mitt Romney needs to say is, you know what, America? I'm not going to apologize for being successful. I'm also not going to apologize for taking advantage of all the deductions provided for me, which is exactly the reason why tax preparers exist, to make sure that every family, no matter what they make, receives every deduction they can. Mitt Romney should then, though, let me add this, Joe, and you can respond, is this. I support higher tax rates at a certain level because we're not going to solve our problems. Let's end the debate. He needs to